Hello and welcome to this Maritime London webinar in partnership with the UK Embassy in Greece, exploring cyber prevention and compliance in shipping. Despite the travel restrictions, I think it's fair to say Maritime London has remained resolutely committed to the Greek market. We've worked on 2 events in the last 12 months, and this webinar will be the start of a series of events in partnership with the Department for International Trade and the Embassy, exploring how technology can assist in ensuring compliance in some of the most vexing issues that are facing the shipping industry today. This series will start with cybersecurity today, and then we will move on to sanctions compliance and GHG monitoring later in the year. So please watch this space for further announcements. As always, I'd like to offer my sincere thanks to the Embassy and Marina and her team, who have worked exceptionally hard to promote and put on this event today in what I know is a very busy schedule for them. And you know, I'm very recently back from paternity leave, so I'd also like to offer my sincere thanks to Julian Clark, Senior Global Partner at Ince and co-chair of the Maritime London Tech and Innovation Working Group, for agreeing to chair today's session. Julian is steeped in all things cyber and shipping, and I'm sure will do a superb job in stewarding the conversation today. Before I pass the baton over to Julian, I'll just run through some housekeeping notices and just add a quick small caveat. Whilst Maritime London has run an awful lot of webinars in the last 12 months, this is the first time using this new conference platform. And whilst I'm sure it will all work seamlessly, please do forgive us in advance if there are any unforeseen tech issues. As always, we're all working from home, so we'll do our best to minimize background noise, etc. But please do forgive us for any children or telephone related interruptions. This session is being recorded and will go up onto the Maritime London YouTube channel in due course. So if you miss anything live, then please do visit that channel in long time, so to speak. And of course, we have the text box, and it's great to see people typing away in there already. We will be opening the floor to questions, and Julian will moderate that. So please don't be shy in coming forward and populate the chat box with as many questions as you would like. That's all from me, I think. If you have any questions in regards to the platform, etc., if you're struggling with the functionality, do just put something in the chat box, and my colleague Olga, who is there ready and waiting, will do her best to assist with any issues. But for now, I will pass over to Julian. Julian, thanks very much, and I'm really looking forward to today's session.
Thanks, Jos. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world tuning in to this webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you here today on behalf of Maritime London for this cyber security and shipping, prevention and compliance. I'd like to add my thanks to those of Jos, to the Department of International Trade and to the Embassy in Athens for facilitating the event today. Just a brief housekeeping word in relation to questions. Please do feel free as the event goes on to put your questions in the chat. In my function as moderator, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, and I'll introduce the questions when I can. The format we're going to have today is we're going to have a quick presentation from the 3 panelists, and then we'll open up to a Q&A for the rest of the session. I'm hoping what we're going to have today is a stimulating debate about a very significant issue for the global shipping sector. There's been a significant rise in the number of attacks from a cyber perspective in our sector over the last 12 months. And so hopefully what we'll get out from today is a real feel for where we are now and where we want to be in the future. So with that, let me introduce you to the 3 members of our panel today. So first is Laurie Eve. Laurie is the Director of Retail with Inmarsat Maritime. As the Director of Retail, Laurie is responsible for supporting the business growth of Inmarsat Maritime Business Unit, plays an integral role in developing the retail channel distribution strategy, driving and defining the right internal and external circumstances for effective and successful retail sales. He's also responsible for managing the quality and effectiveness of the retail sales organization. Laurie began his career in 2001 as an officer in the Royal Marines. So a big thank you also to Laurie for his service. And there he led teams in challenging environments worldwide and in active operations. And then later he worked as a maritime security consultant for merchant shipping and offshore installations in the Middle East and West Africa, providing security to vessels transiting high-risk areas and coordinating maritime counter-piracy operations. Laurie graduated not only as Laurie, a cyber expert and an ex-Royal Marine, but he also somehow found time to gain a first-class honours degree in oceanography and marine biology from the University of Wales, and has recently completed an MBA from Cranfield University. Welcome, Laurie. Khurmi is the Managing Director, Global Services with Templar Executives Limited. That's an award-winning cybersecurity company, and she works across governments and commercial organizations in key sectors, promoting Templar's world-class assurance, advisory, and training capabilities. These include financial services, insurance, healthcare, defense, and of course, maritime, where Templar Executives continues to be an expert contributor to, for example, BIMCO's guidelines on cybersecurity on board ships. She is also responsible for the International Maritime Cyber Security Centre of Excellence, an industry-leading maritime initiative, which encompasses the Maritime Cyber Response Team, which is an international collaborative platform for emergency cyber instant response to information, threat sharing, consultancy, including maritime cyber risk assessment, aligned to the IMO regulations, which we all know came into force on the 1st of January this year. And as well as that, with the Templar Cyber Academy for Maritime, which provides certified training courses to further promote and enable cyber resilience capability and awareness across the maritime ecosystem. Prior to joining Templar, Annie was a senior executive at IBM. She's a liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists and mentors on a Women in Leadership program. And fantastically, in 2011, she founded Cyber Champions, which is a not-for-profit organization promoting best practices in cyber and digital literacy across schools and communities nationally. Annie, welcome to today's panel. And then finally, let me introduce you to Andrew Hill, who's the Executive Director, Product Innovation Lead and Coverage Specialist for Cyber and TNT with Willis Towers Watson. Andrew joined Willis Towers Watson in February 2018 as their cyber coverage specialist, having spent several years in private legal practice in the city. I know this personally because Andrew and I were in the same firm at one point. And there he advised insurers on coverage issues relating to a wide range of financial line policies, including cyber risk. He soon became recognized as one of the leading authorities on cyber risk insurance, and in 2017 was listed in the Legal 500, where he was commended for his expertise on the subject. Now Andrew leads Willis Towers Watson's Cyber Product Development Initiative. He's the author of CyNav, an award-winning cyber policy designated specifically for ship owners. He's also the author of Willis Towers Watson's forthcoming cyber insurance policy for ports and terminals. Regularly works with a number of the largest ship owners and ports and terminal operators in the world, advising on their cyber risk exposures and tailoring insurance solutions to meet their particular requirements. Andrew, welcome to the panel. So as I said when I did my introduction, we're going to kick off today with a presentation from each of the panelists. So Laurie, if I could invite you to share your screen for your presentation, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Everyone. So thanks for the introduction. So IMO 2021 is what I'm sort of focusing on here. And that's very much one of the hot topics of today, I think, in the industry. And in my experience, it's the key driver right now for many ship owners and managers to change their approach and place a higher priority in preparing their sort of cybersecurity measures. So I focus my presentation more towards preparing for IMO compliance, and in doing so, increasing the resilience towards the cyber threat. And we see some pretty scary headlines every day on cyber, and I know Anu will cover some more very pertinent examples in her presentation, but one notable one which I've singled out is from last July, which is the headline on where cyber attacks in the maritime industry's OT systems reportedly increased by 900% over the last 3 years. And whilst we see headlines of attacks regularly now, this is by no means all the cyber attack taking place, with many more going largely unreported. So let's take a little more closer look at the IMO 2021 resolution. And the IMO adopted the resolution on maritime cyber risk management and safety management systems in June 2017. And I've highlighted here on this slide a couple of the key sentences. And also of note is that it references a guidance document, the MSC File Cert 3, as a high set of high-level recommendations on maritime cyber risk management. And I'll come on to that shortly. But essentially, what does this actually mean to ship owners and ship managers? Well, in practice, at the highest level, a ship must demonstrate that the vessel has considered the risks from cyber and what it would do in the case of an incident. And you could compare this to how you have addressed the risk of a fire in the engine room, for example. We have sprinklers, we have extinguishers, trained crew. Here are the certificates for the extinguishers, the training record for the crew, and so on. So in cyber, what does this mean? It means, well, what assets do we have? What would we do if they don't work or if they were compromised, and who has control? So at the start of this process, the vessel needs to identify who is the chief security officer ashore and on board and what assets they have. So it's very good to have some form of asset management on board. A fleet secure endpoint, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that can scan the network and keep a record of this, and it can also demonstrate how those assets are protected and show the controls in place of devices joining the network. Now, if a vessel does not comply, it could be detained and fined. So for IMO 2021, a vessel should have a cyber risk plan which covers OT and IT, and you need to be aware of the kind of hardware you have, what kind of software you have and what's important, what's connected to the network, and how you have protected this. So let's have a look at some of the key guidance documents associated with IMO 2021. So three I'll just briefly cover here. First one is the MSC File Cert 3 document. And these provide a real high-level set of recommendations on maritime cyber risk management. And it's very much geared towards safeguarding shipping from cyber threats and vulnerabilities. The guidelines also include functional elements that support effective cyber risk management, namely identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which are from the Nist Framework, and I'll talk more about later. These guidelines are what they say, they're guidelines, they're recommendatory, and they provide an excellent introduction to cyber threats in the maritime domain. Next, the guidelines on cybersecurity on board ships, version 3, and this is a fairly comprehensive document offering guidance to ship owners and operators on procedures and actions to maintain the security of cyber systems in the company and on board. The guidelines aren't intended to provide a basis for external auditing as such, but it's a really useful document which also draws on the Nist framework to assist companies with their risk management. And then lastly, the Nist framework itself, which is a very comprehensive guide and structure to how to manage risks, including for particular vessel types. It does also provide some free-to-use profile templates by vessel type, which an operator could use to help identify and prioritise actions for reducing cyber risks in their fleet. Now, like many in the industry, at Inmarsat we've been discussing compliance quite a lot lately, and in my experience a few common themes keep coming up. Now the picture on this slide might not look very relevant to cyber, but there is a reason why I put that there, and that's because as an industry we're very aware of safety at sea and ensuring vessel compliance and safety management systems to protect life at sea. However, with cybersecurity, this is much less familiar ground for many, and many are still learning how to do this, and address this well. And one reason for this is simply the technical experience of operators in this area versus the speed at which the cyber threat has been evolving. And another key challenge that I often hear mentioned is OT. And I think that's whilst IT platforms are increasingly standardized across fleets, OT can have a huge variety, especially with relatively high numbers of vessel acquisitions bringing new systems into the fleet. And another challenge evident is in the approach to compliance, with many people looking for a simple solution, something that's going to give them a certificate that they can show to an auditor. But there's no silver bullet here. Whilst we can provide solutions that provide a one-stop shop approach, the operator still needs to demonstrate that they've identified the risks and how they're managed on the vessel. And similarly, there's no definitive checklist of the actions you must do, as it depends on the assets you have and the risks that you identify. So you need that risk management approach. And there's numerous guidelines to help with this. And this leads nicely into the Nist Framework as one form of guidance, which I'll just mention again and quickly highlight here because I believe it can help structure your preparations. So whilst the IMO guidance explains at a high level what a vessel needs to protect, it doesn't specify in detail or provide bullet points that can just be ticked off. So the 5 pillars of the Nist Framework can give you a good way to structure your approach. And relating your plan to this framework gives you a very good start. When we talk about our cyber portfolio, our fleet secure portfolio, we relate the features to this framework to help by ensuring that we're covering each pillar: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So we've talked about the principles. Now I'm going to try and put this into practice and start talking about a pragmatic approach to following best practice and preparing for compliance. The first key step here is to begin to plan. And to do that, you need to know what assets you have. So run an exercise to understand all your critical hardware and software systems on board, your IoT systems, navigation, engine control, cargo control, hardware and software. Record the make, model, version, and the function on all your hardware. And once you've taken note of the possible attack surface amongst your hardware and software, you can work to secure them. It's also good to involve your suppliers to get their statement on cyber readiness and to ensure that supply chain solutions or backups are available for critical hardware. And for software, you can ensure that your operating system is up to date and your software on all ICT and IoT systems are all up to date. So you're documenting what you have, what you will do, and you're incorporating this into your safety management system on board. And then it's a case of review. And this is something that should be done continuously, especially when any new systems are introduced. And after you review, you improve. So harden your systems, continue to train and refresh your people, ensure that crew can spot the signs of a cyber attack and are aware of cyber threats such as phishing emails, social engineering attacks. And you could even include cyber attack scenarios in the ship's emergency drills. And then lastly, verify. And you could use third parties to do this to test your measures such as pen testing. But do remember, this is not just about computers, it's also OT and IoT systems, anywhere which has a door to the network. So with accelerated digitalization, naturally that brings with it more risk. And we need to consider the applications and the necessary security measures hand in hand. And naturally, there are different approaches you can take. And there's a lot of information and guidance out there, which I've only just touched upon. So one solution we offer at Inmarsat is Fleet Secure Endpoint, which is essentially a one-stop shop package that gives you most of the tools you need to be resilient and get compliant in a single package. And it's worth noting it's much more than antivirus or endpoint security. In fact, ESET is only around 20% of this package, with many management features such as asset management, risk assessment, organizational security management reporting, and very shortly to be added, crew training and patch management. Now, as Fleet Secure Endpoints features cover all the Nist pillars from the IMO guidelines, you could say FSE is fully IMO compliant if you use it properly and integrate it into your safety management system. But do bear in mind that the IMO is a recommendation that also requires other steps, such as appointing a responsible person for cyber. So you need to do the work to document these procedures in the safety manual on board. I've also put here on this slide in the bottom left-hand corner a link to our white paper on IMO 2021 cyber requirements, which is well worth a read, and I hope you can find that useful. So you can use this QR code on the slide or drop me an email and I can send you a link. So whilst the IMO 2021 could be viewed as a challenge, I think it should also be viewed as a big opportunity and a driver for everyone to really tighten their security measures for a safer maritime sector and perhaps making us a harder target. So in my presentation, I've covered here the key documents of IMO 2021, what it is and what that means for ship owners, ship managers. We've looked at the key guidelines that can help you get compliant, and we've talked about how to go about preparing appropriate measures and getting those in place. So I hope that's given you a good insight. We're of course always available and very happy to discuss the topic further. Please reach out to myself or the Maritime team in my email here anytime. Thank you very much.
Laurie, thank you for that fascinating presentation. Really good way to start off. And as I said earlier, we will be coming back to questions both from the floor and also to the panelists. But now if I could ask for Annie to start the second presentation for today. Annie, over to you.
Thank you, Julian, and hello, everybody. It's good to be here. So in this session, what I'd like to do is I'd like us to context cybersecurity and cover some of the issues and opportunities and some of the solutions that we are working with in the sector. But first, I think before we move on, I think it's worth reminding ourselves of the importance of Greece in the maritime sector. So Greece remains the world's largest ship-owning nation, and this, along with ongoing developments of Greece's national network of ports, is boosting the country's role in global transport. And contributions from the Greek shipping industry to the economy exceed 11 billion in 2019 and accounted for about 6.6% of gross domestic product. And jobs in the maritime sector make up more than 3% of total employment in Greece. So it's recognized as one of the cornerstones of the global economy, quite rightly. And Greek shipping is comprised predominantly of small and medium privately owned or family businesses. And this is important because there is that ability to be agile and adapt to changing economic circumstances. This is just as well as change is on the horizon, and what happens in Greek shipping will also help to shape the future of maritime. So already a highly competitive market, today the sector is challenged not only with an unprecedented global pandemic, as we all know, but an industry that's transforming at pace as it responds to a range of agendas and economic factors. Underpinning all of these is a growing threat from cyber attacks. So we all remember the Maersk headlines in 2017 and thinking, well, we're under the radar, so it won't happen to us. However, the list that we've got that's come up here actually shows a whole range of cyber attacks on the maritime organization. These are successful attacks, and these are only a snapshot of attacks from last year to the current period. They're all public, and it's notable that these attacks cut across the entire maritime ecosystem and reflect a whole range of threat vectors and players. But it also begs the question from us about how many incidents are never actually classified as cyber attacks or reported, and if, in spite of these occurrences, are we still an industry in denial? So the next slide just touches on some of the work that we're doing. It's based on data from our in-house analysts. It shows that ransomware and other malware was responsible for nearly 50% of cyber attacks on maritime organizations, with phishing as the next biggest threat vector. And just as we saw in the previous slide, the threat actors range from innocent players to organized crime syndicates to nation states deploying advanced persistent threats. It's also worth highlighting the marked increase in espionage as information security fuels nationalistic agendas and competitor advantage. So all of these things highlight why addressing cyber is critical when we look at the challenges and opportunities of a rapidly evolving maritime sector. The areas highlighted are all subject of discussion in their own right in the slide, and I would, of course, welcome a dialogue with any of you on this. To focus on a few of these, though, ship owners and operators will be aware that cyber is now firmly on the agenda and making waves in the sector. It's only a question of time before we see enforcement of the IMO guidance by flags and port state control authorities, such as the US Coast Guard. Failure to make the grade could inevitably lead to ship detentions in ports. Any charterers and their customers worth their salt will look askance at how a ship owner's cyber controls are backed up. Cyber insurance also has a key role to play, both in helping raise the bar on cyber hygiene and providing adequate cover. As an example, we're currently partnered with a European maritime insurer that's providing an innovative policy offering Clause 380 war risk and land-based cover. In a post-COVID world, digitalization will create innovation and efficiencies, but it also opens us up to new threat vectors. Personal as well as organizational liability will inevitably increase under the relatively new data protection laws, such as the Nist Directive and GDPR. However, budgets are not finite and OPEX expenditure is always under pressure. So bringing all these complexities together requires an expert and proportionate approach. From compliance and regulatory requirements to realizing operational efficiencies and managing financial and reputational risk, we've been working hard at Templar Executives and have an outstanding track record demonstrating how applying the right cyber knowledge and making smart cyber investments can be a real market differentiator for an organization. But the maritime sector is not alone in these challenges. Our evolving portfolio of services and solutions is built on pragmatic industry needs with engagements based on trust and discretion and delivering tangible benefits. And we span a whole range of sectors from nuclear, defense, financial services, healthcare, and transport. In terms of maritime, our commitment to the sector includes the contributions to BIMCO's guidelines on cybersecurity on board ships for the past 3 publications, presenting at IMO events, and membership of a number of maritime associations. In parallel, we've leveraged our years of cyber expertise and invested in key requirements for the sector, which offer compliance, risk management, and business resilience for all maritime stakeholders, including ship owners, management companies, and ports. These include the Maritime Cyber Emergency Response Team, an incident response and threat intelligence platform, the Maritime Cyber Risk Assessment, MCRA tools, and training and education from the Templar Cyber Academy. In the interest of time, I'm only going to touch on these in the next few slides in the context of the cyber agenda and risk management, but please do get in touch if you would like some more information. The MCRA is a tiered and comprehensive systems levels risk assessment tool which supports IMO guidance, as Laurie was talking about it in his presentation, and it encourages administrations to ensure that cyber risks are appropriately addressed in existing safety management systems. The MCRA is based on the IMO recommended Nist security framework and adaptable to consider vessel, IT, OT, and IoT, integrated ship-to-shore interfaces, and enterprise IT. It also maps and aligns to a range of other sector guidance and standards. From a ship owner's perspective, this enables them to understand their risk posture and, based on the resulting roadmap, make informed decisions and prioritize decisions on cyber investments. The MCERT is an incident response and proactive threat intelligence platform providing business continuity and risk mitigation through a select range of services available from the MCERT portal. For both the MCRA and MCERT, you do have videos available, and I've included the links in the presentation. In addition to incident response and threat intelligence, the MCERT has built honeypot websites to supplement understanding of the evolving attack vectors that threat actors are using to target maritime organizations. We've seen hundreds of attacks in just the last month alone, and referenced in the slide are some examples. All of this information is analysed and shared with members of the MCERT via daily reports, and alerts are issued as necessary. In terms of, we've all been talking and evangelized about the importance of the human factor when it comes to the cyber agenda, and this focus is absolutely not misplaced. I spoke earlier about ransomware being responsible for nearly 50% of cyber incidents, and it is the people who are the main contributors. Training and education is fundamental to raising the bar and making your employees the first line of defense. Through our Cyber Academy, we offer courses tailored especially for the maritime sector, from certified board-level briefings to awareness e-learning, upskilling individuals, and embedding a positive cybersecurity culture throughout the organization. Our maritime journey started with our clients and preempting their compliance needs, but our vision has always been to help them navigate the cyber agenda and achieve a cyber maturity proportionate to their needs. Our tailored solutions and industry initiatives are geared towards achieving greater collaboration and consistency across the sector, an aim applauded by some of these testimonials from respected industry stakeholders as a way forward. So on that note, I would like to thank you, and I'm going to pass back to Julian, but thank you for your time and attention today.
Annie, thank you so much. That was, again, a fantastic Can I move on, therefore, to our third speaker today, Andrew? So, Andrew, over to you.
I'm going to be 2021, and I'm not actually going to present from some slides. I have slides, but I'm going to do this as like a fireside chat. And for the sort of 20 minutes of my presentation, I really want to walk you through cyber risk through the lens of insurance. Please don't treat that as an opportunity to go to sleep, because I assure you that hopefully there'll be some interesting and illuminating things from the fence, because I guess that you could say, being in the sort of role that I'm in, we see things, cyber risk issues, we see things when they go wrong. And we actually get to see, well, what actually does a cyber risk threat, which results in an incident at a shipping organization, for example, what does that actually look like? And that's quite illuminating. Now, before I launch into my presentation, I think let's just be absolutely clear what we are talking about when certainly from an insurance perspective, we're looking at cyber risk. So what we are talking about are two things essentially: exposures to computer systems in their broader sense, and exposures to data. They're related but different. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about cyber risk. Now, once upon a time, when I first got involved in cyber risk back in 2010, I think it's fair to say that it was an area that the marine industry simply did not think it affected their business. And perhaps that wasn't an unfair assessment, because the origins of cyber risk very much lay at the doorsteps of financial institutions, of retailers, essentially of sectors that adopted computer systems as an integral part of their operations earlier than others. And I think it's fair to say that the marine sector has been one of the later adopters of technology and the embedding of that technology within their business operations. And yeah, certainly back in 2010, nobody was talking about cyber risk and how it affected the marine sector. But over the last 10 years, boy, have things dramatically. And as my fellow panelists alluded to, 2020 in particular was a real watershed year, I would say, for the marine sector, because we hit a point where all four of the world's largest shipping companies have been hit by a cyber attack. And I'm afraid to say there isn't any other sector that claims that rather unwanted award. So I think we are now firmly in the position where, as a sector, and I'm working with shipowners, ports and terminals operators every day, I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think the first stage to cyber risk maturity is acknowledging that as a sector, you are not immune to the challenges of cyber risk. So there is actually one incident that I want to draw to everybody's attention, because it doesn't get the publicity of the Maersk incident back in 2017, of the COSCOs, the MSCs, the CMA, CGMs. It hasn't quite got that publicity, but I would say as an incident, for me at least, and in terms of the products that I develop for marine clients, I think it's hugely important. And that was an incident that happened off the shores of New York back in 2019. And all this information is in the public domain. But essentially what happened, according to publicly available sources, is that a merchant vessel which was bound for the port of New York, at some point during the crossing of the Atlantic Ocean, the captain of the vessel discovered that all of the computer systems, and I emphasize all of the computer systems on board the vessel, had been completely debilitated. This was a vessel that, for all intents and purposes, was no longer working. And what the captain of the vessel had to do was put a call in to the US Port Authority. And according to the report that was prepared by the US Port Authority, they and the FBI had to go out to the vessel, wherever it was, and for all intents and purposes, detain that vessel pending an investigation. And what's really illuminating about this investigation is that the conclusion was that the cyber security on board this vessel was pretty much rock bottom. It's as bad as it can get. Shared passwords, no firewalls, flash drives being stuck in any system that was available, no segregation between the networks, the IT, the OT. It was just a free-for-all. And as I recall, the conclusion from this investigation that the likely cause of the cyber attack on board this vessel was a crew member plugging a flash drive that they probably picked up somewhere on their journey into presumably their personal laptop, which was connected to the Wi-Fi on the vessel, and the malware then had the ability to travel around the entirety of the vessel's network, and that vessel was taken out. And I think this is a really, really important case study. It's important for certainly on my side of the fence, because I'm always looking at loss of revenue issues. And what that tells me is that if a cyber attack can effectively take a vessel out of operation and then result in regulatory investigations, there's significant loss at play here. And this is one of the, I'm not here to plug the SINAV product that we developed at Willis Towers Watson too much today, but the developments of the products that we place on behalf of clients don't just come from figments of our imagination. They come from case studies. They come from working closely with clients and understanding, well, what issues have you seen and what concerns you? So I just wanted to give you that backstory. Now, what are we seeing in terms of cyber trends in the wider world in 2020 and 2021? Well, I can only echo what my fellow panelist Anu said, which is that 2020 was certainly the year of rise of the ransomware. And I can tell you that from a cyber insurance industry perspective, the rise in ransomware has had a dramatic change on our industry. I think it would be fair to say, as an industry, the cyber insurance industry was, to call it the Wild West would be unfair, but it was certainly a land grab for the insurance industry. There was huge demand. It was a case of get the product out there, sell, sell, sell. And I think certainly in the beginning, it proved to be a profitable area for the insurance industry. But regrettably, in 2020, everything changed because ransomware became so prevalent. And the problem with ransomware from a loss perspective is, yes, the average amount of the ransom is increasing all the time. And part of that is the fact that the criminals know that certainly for a publicly listed company, you can just go and access their annual report, see how profitable they are, and then make sure that the ransom demand is something that is within the realms of being payable. So even the criminals are getting more and more sophisticated about their approach. But it's not really the ransom that's causing the insurance industry the challenges that it now faces. It's the business interruption. Because in our experience, and many of the clients that we work with, they don't want to pay the ransoms. Why don't they want to pay the ransoms? Because there's a couple of issues actually. There's the sanctions issue that exists. So there are, in certain territories such as Italy, it is illegal to pay a ransom. And take the United Kingdom, for example, we've got some pretty robust legislation such as the Terrorism Act. We've got sanctions in place, UN, EU, UK, US sanctions. One has to be careful of being compliant with those sanctions and not paying money to criminal organizations. So that's issue number one. And issue number two is that a lot of organizations are really concerned, justifiably, that if you pay the ransom once, are you just lining yourself up to be attacked again? Do you go on the list of easy wins for the criminal to come back to, or indeed share that information amongst the criminal fraternity that you are an easy win? So it's not the ransom that's the problem, it's the business that follows the ransomware attack that is the problem. Because generally what happens is that files are encrypted on systems, meaning that, on computer systems, meaning that for all intents and purposes, the business cannot proceed in the usual way. And even with external IT support, bringing all the experts in, what we see time and time again is even a ransomware event where files are only locked for a couple of days, for example, can have massive implications. And this is even more prevalent in the marine sector, and particularly ship owners and ports and terminal operators, because logistics is like a cyber house of cards. It only takes one card to be pulled away for the whole thing to come falling down. And what we see, particularly with this area, is that it is so precariously balanced that if that ransomware attack is significantly aggressive, the business interruption loss is significant. And we work with clients who have been the victims of cyber attacks in the marine sector, and their business interruption loss can be easily in excess of $50 million very, very quickly, because of the finely balanced and precarious nature that the logistics sector essentially is. So I just wanted to give you a bit of insight into what does it actually mean for this sector when they're hit by a cyber attack. Just thinking about anything else that I would like to share with you. So as I said, I'm not really here today in order to plug the product that we've developed at Willis Towers Watson, but I'm the author of a product called CyNav. Why did we develop CyNav? Well, because when I joined Willis Towers Watson 3 years ago from private practice, I sat down and I looked at what products were generally available in the market. And it was quite clear to me that the direction of travel was a sort of off-the-shelf approach. So you take a product off the shelf, a few manuscript amendments, and then you're on your way. And what we realized very quickly was that whilst there are some common cyber threats and cyber outcomes, there are certainly unique outcomes that arise from cyber threats for different sectors. And the marine industry is certainly one of those. And it was quite clear to us, and because clients aired this with us, that off-the-shelf solutions were never going to work for them. They did not accurately address the realities of their business model. So we sat down and we developed something. And what makes what we developed special? Well, it's a recognition that none of us know everything about cyber risk. And I think that's really, really important, because if we take CyNav, for example, I would consider myself as being a cyber insurance expert, but I am not a mariner. And we realized very quickly that in order to ensure that we actually delivered something that is meaningful for clients, we had to pull and draw upon different areas of expertise. So CyNav is a product that is led by me as a cyber expert, but we use experienced mariners from the hull and machinery part of the business. We use cybersecurity specialists within the business. These are generally ex-GCHQ or ex-military individuals. And it's drawing all those strands together that end up with a product that we're able to say, no, this actually works for
Andrew, could I draw you to a conclusion there, please? I'm mindful of time.
Yes, of course. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Julian.
Thank you, Andrew. So, some fascinating observations there, I think. What I'd like to do is move to some questions. A couple of housekeeping points. Do remember, please, that there's a Q&A box to the right-hand side of your screen. Please do put your questions into that Q&A box. And also, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's an option for polls. And we've been running some polls. So if you look into that poll section, you can vote in that section and let us have your answers and feelings to those questions in the polls. Laurie, if I could turn to you first. To what extent do you think Port State Control are ready to test compliance under MSC 42898? And how do you think this is going to work in practice?
Thanks, Julian. That's a very good question, and I think that's probably one that most ship owners and ship managers want to know. So essentially, will IMO 2021 actually be enforced? And could you get away with no action, for example? To date, I'm not aware of any instances of any fines or even detentions as a result of non-compliance so far. And I've asked around colleagues, partners, and so on, and so far no one can give me any examples. But I think the things we do know is Port State Control, they carry out a variety of inspections, and they generally will check the ISM in every case. And as the MSC document states, the ISM should be kept updated and will be checked. So I think the very basics of a review will need to be in the ISM to show that the vessel is making progress. And if there is no ISM update, then I suspect Port State Control will issue a deficiency if it's not adequate. That will go on record, and the ship will be issued with a Port State Control report stating the deficiency. So, and then I guess the next inspection will then look at any reports from Port State Control and identify whether the deficiencies have been resolved or whether they will continue. And I think it's probably more likely at that point that that fines or even detentions are possible. And I think Port State Control varies from country to country, but generally they give warnings. And I think the severity does also impact this as well. If they'll give warnings, but it does depend on how serious it is. And if it is serious and there's not been any action, then no doubt, some action will be taken. But the last sort of point I'll make on this is just, IMO 2021 is the starting point here. And I firmly believe that do nothing is not an option. This very much promotes hardening our cyber security measures from a regulatory requirement. But let's not forget that the cyber threat is a very real threat, an evolving threat. And just look at the figures. Cybercrime is costing the global economy $1 trillion a year now. That's 50% up on 2018 levels.
Thanks, Laurie. Andrew, if I could turn to you, there's a question that's come into the chat, which is this: what percentage of sorry, Andrew, could you turn your microphone off for a second? Thank you. What percentage of ship owners are today placing separate cyber insurance coverage for their organisations and vessels, and what levels are covered at what premium? And if I could add one more question, which was something that came out of one of the earlier polls. We were asking people about the adequacy and availability of cover, and the highest percentage of responses felt that the level of coverage currently available was inadequate to address cyber risk. Could I get your comments on those issues, please?
Thanks, Julian. You might have to repeat the first question, Julian, but I'll answer the other two limbs of the question. Starting with the final part of the question, which was the adequacy of cover. I would agree that this is a challenge for the cyber market. Now, remember, the hull and machinery market for a very, very long time and is able to offer significant towers of insurance. Cyber, by comparison, is an extremely immature area of insurance. And yes, we have a number of big ship owners coming to us saying, we would love if you were able to get us $500 million, $600 million worth of cyber cover. I'm afraid to say at this moment in time, that is not feasible. And we are able realistically to build towers of insurance of maybe $300 to $400 million. And when we're talking about property damage, bearing in mind that we're seeing the LMA 5403 exclusion now appearing regularly in hull and machinery policies, i.e. excluding cyber attacks, we regularly place property damage cover for ship owner clients, but regrettably the sort of towers that we're looking at are 100 million, maybe 150 million, which I know at this moment of time is probably not adequate. In terms of premiums, again, I'm afraid the sort of bad news is that as a result of what's been going on in 2020 with the sharp rise in ransomware attacks, premiums have increased dramatically. And I'm afraid it can increase dramatically such that we get an inquiry and we give a price to a client, they take it away, they discuss the issue with their board, and 3 months later, 4 months later, they come back and they say, right, we'd now like to start taking this forward. And what we see happening are prices creeping up a little bit again. So we are really encouraging our clients to be as decisive as they possibly can be in order to lock the pricing, because I'm afraid at the moment the traffic is only going in one direction, and that is just reflected by the increased claims activity that we're seeing.
Andrew, if I could come to fantastic what you and Templar are doing in relation to assisting with compliance. But when we look at the new IMO regulation, there is a lot of commentary that, apart from externally, it's very hard to see what guidelines are there. And as Laurie just identified, at the moment, not clear how Port State Control will react. Some players in the industry are approaching compliance as it's a tick box approach. So as long as I can tick the boxes on my compliance, I've done all that's needed. What's your view on that kind of approach?
I think you're wasting your money, really, if you're taking a tick box approach to cyber. It's as simple as that for me, because, as I've mentioned before, budgets are finite in terms of expenditure. You do have to prioritize business decisions and where you are going to put your investments. Doing something for the sake of a tick box exercise, when you might be able to do it more effectively using similar budgets and putting some really good solutions in place because you've been more discerning rather than reacting, I think is always a good thing. And I think it's really important because cyber isn't about today. It's about something that changes dynamically at every hour of the day. And we've seen so many different complexities, threat vectors, how criminals take advantage of vulnerabilities as soon as they can find them and aren't discriminating. So from my perspective, we have to respond in a way that is more about being sustainable in terms of our responses to a dynamic changing landscape and being able to make it part of our DNA. So an example, a simple example, if you're doing training, it's no point just doing just having people do their training and going right to the end of that session and just ticking the boxes. We need to explain to people why it's relevant to them and their roles, why it's important, why it's not just, a part of their sort of work, but sort of digital environment at work and at home, and why these things are relevant to them, and why actioning these things doesn't mean you end up with more work, but what you end up with is more efficient, being able to work more efficiently and being more skilled. So for me, a tick box exercise doesn't work. I think it's really important, as Laurie also pointed out, that you meet all the requirements that IMO have laid on us in terms of recommendations and following frameworks like Nist, which advocate best practice, and that BIMCO have put out there as well. And those are sensible things to do, but to do them properly is very important. If you spend the same amount of money, you can do things more effectively if you know why you're doing them and why it's important for you and you believe in that.
Thanks, Annie. That's really helpful, that observation. Actually, that leads me to something that Laurie spoke about, which was the heightened risk to OT systems. And of course, this is something very close to my heart. And the reason that we went into this joint collaboration with Mission Secure in the United States to offer a lifetime defense to ships by placing on board military-grade cybersecurity. But when I've been speaking to traders and operators, we still hear this combination about the risk not justifying or even supporting the cost, or the fact that owners and operators will say, "Look, we're adequately adequately protected. We have firewalls. We think our IT networks are very secure." Laurie, do you think that they're missing something on that and not really appreciating the OT exposure?
Personally, yeah, I think that's the case. But I think, like I said at the start, it depends on what you have and what you have to protect. There's a massive variety of OT, which I think is part of the challenge. It's much easier to standardize your IT platforms than it is your OT on vessels. But within that sort of variety, then some of these systems are absolutely vital, and you need to take much more serious care and much more robust measures with some of your vital systems, and others may be less vital. So I think it goes back to that initial stage of identifying what you have on board. you know, what's vital, what's not, what you can do without, what you can't. And, you know, in terms of the measures that you apply and the cost of those measures, you know, it depends very much on how important those systems are. You know, if you're talking about your navigation systems and, you know, your engine control and other things, you know, clearly they're going to be much more important than some others. So, so I think it's very, very important to just, you know, establish the importance and what will you do in the event of them being compromised or not working.
I'm staggered to see that we're actually up to time, but before we sign off, I want to do one question for all three panelists to just come back on quite quickly, if you could, because of timing. Also wanted to say something about the poll, and thank you very much for those that have been responding to the poll. 3 questions were there. How confident do you feel that you are MSC 42898 compliant as of today? Interestingly, nobody on this call believes that they're fully compliant. Some believe that they're about 66% think they're some of the way there, but not there yet. And 33% saying only partially compliant. In relation to the point that Annie picked up on crew, are crews adequately trained and aware of the requirements of 42898? Only 11% said yes, 66% saying more needs to be done, and actually 22% identifying real deficiencies. And then in relation to how concerned are you concerning a cyber attack, 70% of people saying very, 30% of saying moderately, and none at all on this call saying that they weren't concerned at all. So the question I wanted to ask was something that came out of an example Andrew gave, and so this is for all 3 panelists, which was his example of a vessel that is so compromised at trading to New York, she goes into blackout. I've had conversation with owners where one of the reasons they say we don't fear a cyber attack is we'll just swap back to analog. We'll just go back to charts. We'll instantly take out the bit of equipment that had been cyber compromised, and that will not be an issue. Is that a correct way to address cyber risk, Annie?
Right. It's an interesting question, and there is a simple answer to that, which is it's not just about the technology, and it's about the people, and it's about your processes, and it's about your policies. So cyber is, you have to be holistic about it. I spoke about where some of those attacks are coming from. Ransomware is people. We have social media now, which is rife, especially in the current sort of COVID situation. People are still learning how to use all of those technologies in terms of being able to communicate with each other. And it's a hackers and cyber criminals paradise at the moment in terms of accessing all these vulnerabilities. And none of that is to do with the technology you've got on board your vessel. It's about when your crew are talking to their families. It's about when they're coming offshore at ports and doing their banking. It's about how the onshore offices are putting together bills of lading and trying to communicate. And of course, another piece that has nothing to do with the technology is spear phishing and targeting individuals of interest in organizations. And again, cyber criminals are increasingly sophisticated at doing that. It's no longer, you can't tell what those emails, where they come from, because people, they are so well put together. And plus, you use social media to research people. So my view on that is that in today's environment, if that's the view that we take, that's a very naive view.
Thanks, Annie. And Laurie, again, mindful of time, quite quick answer to that same question.
I would agree very much with Anu. I think she answered that very, very well. I don't think that approach would stand up at all. You know, we have to accept the reality. If you're on board and spending months and months away from home, you know, the crew will expect to have access to internet. And if you don't provide that, then they'll seek elsewhere where they can get it. You know, so we have to accept that people will be accessing the internet and the risk that brings with it. The focus should be on our people and making sure that they are trained and aware of the threat. That needs to be embedded in our culture, and it needs to be done on a regular basis so that crew can keep vigilant, they can keep an eye out for these types of attack. And then that's really, I think, the key thing. Make sure they're trained, make sure they're aware.
Thanks, Laurie. And finally, Andrew.
Short answer, Julian. I won't sit on the fence on this. It is absolutely the wrong approach. Why is it the wrong approach? Because take the US Port Authority in the New York cyber incident. There is absolutely no way that a port authority is going to allow keep on moving that has been entirely compromised by a cyber attack. You know, who knows who's in control of that vessel? That is a real security risk.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come up. In fact, we've run over our hour. So thank you very much for your attendance today. I hope you found this presentation interesting and illuminating. I know I have. There's a networking session, which is now open, which is available at the left-hand side of the screen. And also there is a round table session for those that have been invited to attend the round table. So could I give my thanks to Annie, to Laurie, and to Andrew, to Jos, and to Olga, and again to the Department of International Trade and the Embassy for facilitating this session, and to all of you for being such an engaging and interesting audience, for your responses to the polls, and also for the fantastic questions you placed into the chat. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be. Thank you.